Those in political leadership do not want alternative views. But democracy, the thing we call democracy, is about competition of ideas. You put the ideas in the marketplace, and those who make the choice then decide which is the better idea. You know, I feel pain because those who are heads of state in this region are people that are known to us. They are people who, if you look at their history, at least some of them, you can say that they had good ideas. If I look at Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and his views in the 1980s when he was in the forefront of the liberation of Uganda, his clarity and his vision could not be questioned. He took the view that people should not stay in power for too long. He took the view that he should have successors. He took the view that views should be articulated. It therefore pains some of us who are sympathetic to that history to see the level of intolerance. Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan came from a history and a legacy of a great man, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, who believed in a competition of ideas. Nyerere would attend the University of Dar es Salaam and debate with students. And it therefore pains us, those who are sympathetic to that history and that legacy, to see the level of intolerance. I do not agree with my good friend Tindi Lisu on many issues, but I don't believe that he has committed the offense known to law as treason on the basis of the evidence that is available. And I do not believe that when you are going into an election, you ban people from participating in the election. It is the electorate that should make that decision. And if the electorate is not made or given the opportunity to make that decision, then whatever outcome there is illegitimate.
So are you saying she's an illegitimate president?
There is a crisis of legitimacy. You know, many people don't make this distinction, that which is legal is not necessarily right. So from a legal perspective, he has gone through the process of the electoral process as prescribed under Tanzanian law. So to that extent, her presidency is legal, but is her presidency legitimate and anchored in morality as seen by the reasonable public opinion? The answer to that question is no. It is no, because when you hear voices of reason, and the voices of reason that I know and that I talk to are actually sympathetic to Tanzania. Because then Tanzania is the only country, or was the only country, where ethnicity had been killed as the basis of mobilization. Its economy is on the up. For it to happen that through an electoral period, people die, it is painful. And it is for the love of Tanzania that we see this pain. Kenya, of course, to complete the circle, is also problematic. It is in this country that Nnamdi Kanu was abducted, and I acted for Nnamdi Kanu, and we have gotten a judgment in his favor. The government has been condemned to pay 10 million and taken to Nigeria and is in prison in Nigeria. It is in this country that Kizza Besigye was abducted. It cannot be right. If you look at international law, rendition is something that we should not allow. People should be allowed to exercise their democratic rights, even if we don't agree with them. So you see, there is a crisis. We are signatories to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We are signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all the UN charters. Why do we create an environment where people who don't agree with us become our enemies? It is a competition of ideas, so that what is happening in this region is that fear is being used by those in political leadership as an instrument of paralyzing the population into silence.
Will the population agree to that when you look at it?
History is consistent that you can only paralyze a population for so long. The things that we see, for example, that we saw in the Arab Spring that brought down governments, what we have seen in the streets of Africa, it started in Nairobi, Kenya. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Cameroon. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Abidjan. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Dar es Salaam. It did not go the full length. It went the full length in Madagascar. It went the full length in Bangladesh. It went the full length in Nepal. Demonstration and protest is the language of the unheard. And wisdom has always required and demanded at once that you listen to people, because you are a trustee to hold public office. Why do we call people in public office honorable? It is not because of them. It is the office that we honor. Why do we call them excellencies? They are not, or may not even be excellent. Many times in Africa, they are not. But it is the institution, the offices that they hold for the sake of the nation. When they begin to think that they are demigods, they must remember there was a French Revolution. They must remember that there was the Turkish revolt. They must remember that people rose, the student protests in 1960s in Europe. They must remember that the colonialist was here and they left. And the sooner they do so, they must remember that recently Bashar al-Assad left for Moscow with a suitcase. They must remember that Rajuel in Madagascar disappeared. We do not know where they are. They must remember that Sheikh Hasina is hiding. Nobody knows where she is.
When we get to a point, and it's very interesting, you give live scenarios that we're experiencing now, but then on the other hand, you look at it, when our citizens, Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, had been missing for 38 days, then they are released. And then on the same day, the president of Uganda confesses that we arrested them because I was told they are expert rioters, and I kept them in a fridge. Of course, yesterday we see the PS Singwei saying it was metaphorical for him to use that. But when a president confesses to arrest other citizens, yet the foreign affairs of Kenya doesn't seem like...
You know, I know both Njagi, I know Oyo. These are young men who mean well. They mean well. They feel pain for Kenya, they feel pain for humanity, they feel pain for the black man. When they went to Uganda, they were showing solidarity with one of the candidates. It is their right to do so. Of course, it is always wise to remember that when you're in a foreign country, the rules may be different. But when a national of a country is detained by a sister or brother country, it is incumbent upon that country's foreign affairs to be involved. You know, when I see the headlines of the Standard newspaper on the 13th day of November 2025 saying, we need diplomacy, you cannot contradict them. You cannot contradict them. Why do we have an embassy in Uganda? Did we see any attempt at negotiation? Did we see? We did not. It is important that we take care of our citizens wherever they are, even when they are in trouble, particularly when they are in trouble. We had surrendered to the situation. If it had happened that it is their dead bodies that were delivered, our country would just have said, Hewala.
So, is our top diplomat, CS Musalia Mudavadi, doing his job? Is he up to the task? Has he failed the country?
The cabinet secretary for the time being, Mr. Musalia Mudavadi, is somebody that I know. But I'm afraid to say that he has not discharged his functions to the best of the expectations of the people of Kenya.
What would be the limitations? Or what would be that is holding him?
The question is, what is our foreign policy as a country? We may have papers that say this is our foreign policy, but diplomacy has a history to it. If you look at history, why do countries have foreign envoys? Countries have foreign envoys as number one, as a demonstration of the good relationship with the countries in which they are credited. Countries have envoys for purpose of ensuring that their citizens in those spaces are protected. The cabinet secretary in the Kenyan arrangement is the chief diplomat. The ambassadors are appointed, of course, as the representatives of the head of state, and they are expected to protect their citizens. We want to hear them. This country has had foreign ministers who came out and articulated things on behalf of the Republic of Kenya firmly. I remember Munywa Wayaki discharging his functions firmly. I remember Robert Ouko. And whether you disagreed with them or not, they occupied those positions with dignity, and they were heard and they were respected. I'm nostalgic about those days. But today, and I know, and I am involved in a number of cases of Kenyans who are outside and are suffering outside of the Republic of Kenya, and you ask for assistance, not even an acknowledgement letter is written to you.
We've even lost citizens in Tanzania.
And nobody appears to be bothered. We have citizens in Dubai who are detained. Nobody is talking about them. We have citizens in the United States of America. Nobody is talking about them. And one therefore wonders, why do we have these individuals who are paid using taxpayers' money in those spaces? There is no shortage of Kenyans who can discharge this function. And when we speak as we do, then we are vilified and demonized. And they use the Kiswahili word, wachache wasiotosheka. How can we be satisfied when we can see that pain is being visited upon our kith and kin? We cannot be satisfied. We cannot afford that luxury. I would have thought right now, in light of what is going on in the East African region, in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Somalia, and Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi, I would have thought that an extraordinary meeting of the East African community would be summoned to discuss the crisis, because there is a crisis in the region. I would have thought that this is the time to convene such a meeting, to discuss what is happening, because the East African community is threatened. We thought that we would now be moving towards integration. But listen to the rhetoric. Are we talking as people who are moving towards integration?
We've even been threatened by about the Indian Ocean, accessed by the president of Uganda. And I don't think Kenya has said a thing.
Kenya has not said a thing. Perhaps that is wise diplomatically. I believe that what we should do as a country is to engage the president of the Republic of Uganda. And our communication should be that the ocean is for us to share. This is a common right. We have a duty, and some of us, in order to give meaning to those relationships, say that Uganda is not landlocked, Uganda is land-linked. South Sudan is not landlocked, is land-linked. Burundi is not landlocked, it is land-linked. Rwanda is not landlocked, is land-linked. In other words, the ports of Bagamoyo in Tanzania, Tanga, Mtwara, the port of Mombasa, the port of Lamu are available to them. If there are any hitches, these are things that should be handled diplomatically. And if we engage in that space and we are moving towards integration, even that kind of rhetoric becomes unnecessary. And this is why I hold the view that there are so many issues flying around in the East African region that it is necessary for the heads of states and government to do a quick meeting. And once they have done the quick meeting and have identified the issues, then the issues for determination can be cascaded to the relevant ministers, and the relevant ministers then cascade it to the bureaucrats.
Is it that we're too expectant of these leaders to do that? Because you've, of course, pointed out the election of Samia is questionable.
Yes.
When you look at it. But these same presidents, we are saying, ought to have a meeting, were the first to send their congratulations, and yet people are dying. They said nothing about it.
You know, we are also in a space of what I call hear no wrong, see no wrong, be politically correct. And in this era of political correctness, a lot of things are being swept under the carpet. But who is your friend? He or she is your friend who tells you that you have made a mistake. Because if you have a friend that does not tell you the mistakes you have made, then you don't need enemies. And that is, in my view, the space in which we find ourselves. Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, whom I know and respect, will have it very difficult to even travel outside of Tanzania. It will not be easy because the environment is being created in which wherever she will be going, there'll be people who will be questioned. And I travel across the continent of Africa and I read the sentiments across the continent of Africa. They are not favorable. So the first thing that would have done would be to say, yes, you have an election. Perhaps we cannot take it back, but engage the opposition. Release everybody who is in detention. Because governance sometimes requires forgiveness. Release all of them. Enter into negotiations with them. Begin the process of constitution review so that Tanzanians have a conversation. Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere said it many years ago, that the moment you stop listening to the people, that is the moment you expose yourself to danger. The moment you dismiss your population as nincompoops who have nothing to offer, that is the moment you begin to lose it. The moment you begin to believe that you have a monopoly of knowledge and wisdom and that you cannot be advised, that is the moment you begin to lose it. And history is consistent. It has examples. So we must have the moral courage to speak the truth and let the chips fall where they are and where they may. And you know, when you are a speaker of the truth, you don't need to rehearse. It is liars who rehearse. Speakers of truth just speak the truth because they mean well, even when it does not appear as if they do.
Do you think she means well? Because you're saying they ought to have had conversations before.
Yes.
But just the other day, the deputy party leader of Chadema had been arrested again, I think on Monday, Tuesday. John H. and released. When they were released, they were asked what happened. They were saying they didn't even question us. There was nothing major. So when you look at it, how is this presidency, this term going to be like for her?
In my view, if it continues in this way, it's going to be very painful. Because when you are in a space where you are not engaging those who you consider to be your opponents, your political opponents are not your enemies. You are all talking about the same country, just the perspective. Some people think the country should be run this way in matters agriculture, in matters health, but otherwise you are working towards the benefit of the same country. But if you consider your political opponents as your mortal enemies, then you end up being paranoid. You see enemies emerging from every corner, even when they are not there. You begin to have enemies, real and imagined. And when you are in that space, then you are in a very dangerous space. And that is why it is incumbent upon those who mean well for these conversations to begin in earnest. In this country, to our credit, whenever we have found ourselves in such situations, whenever we were on the brink, we have had these painful conversations. In 2007, 2008, the country was on the brink, and we had painful conversations. We made painful decisions. We created offices that were not necessary, sometimes just to massage people's egos in order to calm the temperatures and protect the country. Sometimes it becomes necessary for the long-term health of the country, because if you don't, then the country can collapse. Ask Sudan. The country has collapsed. Ask Central African Republic. The country has collapsed. Ask the Cameroonians. The country is collapsing. Ask our good friend the Somalis how long it has taken to rebuild that country again. So there are examples, but it is tragic that it appears that we do not learn anything from history and examples that are before us. We say we are different. No, history is consistent.
They say we are Tanzania, we're not Kenya. But there are conversations that this could be somehow the end of the reign of CCM as a party as we have known it. And also there are questions as to why former President Jakaya Kikwete has been quiet all this time. Yet when Kenya was actually going through the turmoil in 2007, he was a key figure.
You know, Chama cha Mapinduzi has a history. And you remember that Chama cha Mapinduzi has its origin in the union between TANU, Tanganyika African National Union, of Mwalimu Nyerere at that time, and Afro-Shirazi of Sheikh Amani Abeid Karume in 1964. And after that, it became Chama cha Mapinduzi in 1977. And is a party with roots. Chama cha Mapinduzi is the political party with roots in the villages and hamlets of Tanzania, in people's hearts. Of course, when multi-party came and the political space was opened, we have seen the emergence of parties such as Chadema, ACT, Mawazalendo, CAF, and all these other parties, both in mainland Tanzania and in Zanzibar. And Nyerere in 1995, when he was called at the meeting of CCM to give a speech on who ought to be the candidate for Chama cha Mapinduzi, he said three things. Lazima tumchague mtu ambaye hana udini na ukabila, a candidate who will not use ethnicity and religion for political mobilization. Lazima tumchague mtu ambaye ataipiga vita rushwa. Somebody will fight corruption. And he made these words, which are taken from the Arusha Declaration. He said, rushwa ni adui ya nchi, sitatoa wala sitapokea. Corruption is the enemy of the nation. I'll not give and I'll not receive. And he warned them that if we do not have that candidate within Chama cha Mapinduzi, that candidate will come from somewhere else. Those words of Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere ring true to my mind to date. And he said, once again in Swahili, siri ya maendeleo ni watu, ardhi na siasa safi. People, land, and clean politics. And he then said, siri ya maendeleo ni vijana wenye malezi bora, siha njema na bongo kali. Young people who are well-bred and are sharp. He said this thing. And Tanzanians know. They are playing those snippets in Tanzania even now. But unfortunately, to answer your question directly, CCM has now been shaken, but it's still a party that you cannot dismiss. CCM is in the tradition of African National Congress.
Which
they
was
don't
also
collapse.
shaken.
They are shaken, but they don't collapse immediately. It is in the tradition of Frelimo in Mozambique. They are shaken, but they don't collapse immediately. They are in the tradition of SWAPO in Namibia. They can be shaken, but they don't collapse. In tradition of MPLA in Angola, the tradition of ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, because they have credentials over a long period. But you must have a sense of history. And that is what brings me to your question about Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, who, as a former president, retired president, who was very present in attempts at negotiation. Many Tanzanians are asking, where is Jakaya? We want to hear Jakaya's voice. And many are speculating that perhaps he has been too intimately involved, quietly. And that is why he's not coming out. But I want to give him the benefit of doubt. Jakaya, come out. Nyerere used to say, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. He has a history, a vested interest in ensuring that Tanzania does not collapse, that the legacy of Nyerere, the legacy of Mzee Mwinyi, the legacy of Mkapa, the legacy of John Joseph Pombe Magufuli are preserved for this generation and generations yet to be born. Tanzanians are posing these painful and difficult questions, and they must be answered. They cannot be wished away. Anybody who thinks that what has happened can be wished away is deluding themselves. In the history of any country, whenever there has been death, it is never the same again. The age of innocence is gone.
and they have to deal with it,
Oh, you've
whether
got
you
to
like
deal
it
with
or
it.
not.
Whether you like it or not, there are families that are hurting. And in this era of social media, before the truth takes the stairs, lies have taken the elevator.
So is it possible that we're going to see, you see, in South Africa, we saw ANC, due to what happened, they had to have like a coalition sort of with the DA party, and somehow they had to move. Are we going to see this? Is it likely that we'll see the same with CCM and maybe parties like Chadema?
You know, if I was asked by the government of the Republic of Tanzania, led by CCM, please advise us, this is what I would tell them. Number one, call a meeting presided over by Samia Suluhu Hassan of all registered political parties in Tanzania. All of them. Once you've called that meeting, call a meeting of all active and legitimate civil society organizations in Tanzania. Have a meeting with them. Call a meeting of all organized religious societies in Tanzania. Have a meeting with them. Once you've done that, get into a government of national unity. It happened in Kenya, it happened in South Africa, it happened in Zimbabwe. Once you have done so, release anybody who has been arrested on politically related charges. Those who are criminals, deal with them. The criminals deal with, but any person who has been arrested on politically related charges, release them. After you have done that, now go back to what the opposition has been talking about, that the Tanzanian constitution needs to be dealt with. Remember that under Tanzanian law, there is no opportunity to go to court, which is unfortunate and ought to have been done. Because if there was that avenue, then the opposition would have gone to court. We would now be listening to the arguments in court as to the legitimacy or otherwise of the electoral results. You start this process and give yourself time. You say, we are going to do this constitution for the next 2 years. Once we do this constitution for the next 2 years or maximum 3 years, then on the basis of that, in the following year, we create structures that have been created under the constitution. And in the 4th year, earlier than the next scheduled election. We call elections on the basis of the new constitution. And I, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, will not offer myself for re-election. History will remember him in a totally different way, and historians and even his perceived political enemies will forgive him. That is the kind of candid advice that the president now needs. But unfortunately, in this day and age, she will have no shortage of advisors. Kumwambia mama, hao ni wababaishaji tu, hao ni wahuni tu, wanafiki tu. They'll tell her. Na hao wengine ambao wanakuambia, wanakupa ushauri tofauti, ushauri mbadala, ni wababaishaji tu, si ni Wakenya tu.
By the way, what's this beef between Kenya and Tanzania?
It's historical. The beef between Kenya and Tanzania is historical. Remember, and I'm a student of East African community, I've written about it. If you remember when Kenya was, when the first community collapsed, our foreign policy was always ambivalent, even during the struggle against apartheid. While Tanzania had clarity and was in the frontline states, ours was ambivalent. Kenya and Malawi were not quite clear. Even when Jomo Kenyatta mediated the problem in Angola, there was no clarity. That is number one. Number two, we took a totally different path in the 1960s in terms of our politics. In session of paper number 10 of 1965, we say that is African socialism, but we were much more inclined to what was then characterized as capitalism. Tanzania, on the other hand, was much more inclined to a system which was unique to them, ujamaa, which was, of course, nationalization of assets and therefore socialistic. And then we appeared as if, on average, we are arrogant and contemptuous of others. And Tanzanians tend to be a lot more polite, even when they are arresting you, as they say in Tanzania, the police officers request that naomba nikutie nguvuni. So our perceived arrogance, and there is something when the East African community was collapsing, what was called the Nairobi mentality. The Nairobi mentality is the misguided belief by Kenyan officialdom that we are better than everybody in East Africa. And that rubs the Tanzanians the wrong way. And unfortunately, over the years, we have not succeeded in changing that image. And it's not all Kenyans who are in that space. It's only a few. But remember, stereotyping is something that takes root and is very difficult to eliminate. And that is the reason why even now we are seen to be anti-Tanzania. And it doesn't help when the Tanzanians have a problem and we are seen to be in a celebratory mood in certain quarters. It doesn't help.
And also, when you look at the election that was, Kenya really pushed for Tanzanians overall in
Yes.
terms of their liberation, quote unquote,
Yes.
and just for the human rights, I think.
Yes.
So,
and the other thing that we don't talk about, there are a lot of non-governmental organizations which are very active, Western funded here, which are very active in Kenya and therefore a lot more vocal. But the Tanzanians have a different history. And part of the reason why Tanzanians also fear interacting with us too intimately is the ethnicity in our politics. I know a Tanzanian friend of mine who said, hatutaki wa Kenya watuambukize na siasa za ukabila. And that is legitimate.
That's very true.
That is a legitimate concern, that the more we interact with them, the more we are going to export what they consider to have political bad manners, where we organize ourselves around Ikoyo, Luo, Kamba, Luhia, and Kalenjin. In Tanzania, nobody talks about that. People, there are more ethnicities, but they talk about Vyama, they talk about CCM, they talk about Chadema, they talk about ACT Wazalendo, they talk about CUF. And to that, we must praise Tanzania and praise Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere.